My dad tells me stories about my grandpa, and I'm like, are we talking about the same guy?
He
He's like,
did.
yeah, your grandpa was a mean old hellraiser. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's a teddy bear.
It's a totally different relationship with you than with your son.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
And
sounds
then
good.
also, too, like I'm seeing it with my dad, and I'm like, Dad, you like how you are with my kids is just completely different now. Like, where was this when I was a kid? I was scared of you, you know?
Well, and part of it is that is the difference.
Yeah.
And not that you give your grandkids anything and everything they want. There's still reaction. There's still, consequences to actions.
Yeah.
But we had a conversation with our grandson on Friday, and he was kind of questioning what God, if he's guilty or, kind of that relationship when you're a teenager with God. It's like he's always going to beat me down for all the stuff that we do wrong.
Sure.
I lived in that world as a teenager.
Sure. I did too.
And we were kind of talking about it. I asked the question. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Think of the worst thing you could possibly do. And ask the question, will Pops not love me anymore?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting thought exercise.
Yeah. And he was thinking, and he knew there wasn't anything that would make me quit loving him. He knew it. And I said, well, what about God? He goes, yeah, I don't know. But it was kind of a fun conversation because there'll be consequences to actions if he does that, whatever that thing is in his mind. But it's not going to change my love for him.
Man.
And that's the way I have a relationship with Jesus. There's just nothing. He's crazy in love with me. And that's kind of how I live my life.
And I love that.
Yeah. I look in the mirror every morning pretty much and go, I'm crazy in love with you as Jesus is talking to me. And I realize, well, wait a minute. I'm not crazy in love with me. How is that even possible?
I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of it is that we project onto God how we feel about ourselves.
Correct.
And the greatest thing about this Christian faith, this walk, this relationship, is that it gets us out of our own egocentric thinking. It allows us to transcend our perspective beyond our two eyeballs, and to imagine this ideal of what is the greater good, and then you get to see life and yourself through the perspective of what is the greater good rather than your own perception of your faults and failures.
Yeah.
Man, I think that's a case for evangelism. I think that's why the world's a better place.
I agree.
By giving the gospel, yeah. And I'm not going to say that atheists are bad people, but not at all. I have friends who are atheists and agnostic, but I think it gives us a little bit of an unfair advantage in this world, if I can say that. It gives us a slight edge.
Yeah.
Allows us to.
I just know after having grandchildren, it's just, I don't say the love is different. It's just, there's really nothing they can do that will change my love for them.
Perhaps maybe
So
it's not a deeper love than what you have with your kids when you're grandparents. Perhaps it's more of a mature evolution of love. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as judgmental or worried. As a parent, you've got responsibility to raise your children to be great members of society. That's kind of our job, if you want, and plus a relationship with Christ. I mean, that's if there's two things, I would say that's it.
Yeah.
But with grandchildren, all you're there is to support, and you recognize the parents really have that first responsibility.
So the pressure's off.
The pressure's a little bit off. The pressure is on in a way where you're not going to necessarily, or you should not. Here, I don't know why I'm talking about grandparents, but it's this idea that you're supporting. Grandparents need to support the parents' views, whatever that is. But you can do that in a way that's totally loving and totally responsible to the parents' views and your own part. So it's really special.
I love it. No, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, you're helping me kind of understand this a little bit more. Because so I've got two girls, and I've got my boy.
Yes.
And as you can imagine, my relationship with my boy is way different than it is with my
Absolutely
girls.
is.
I'm Martha's at the point where she's like, you are really hard on Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And in all honesty, I tell her it's because the expectations are different with him because he's my son. I feel more pressure
Yes.
with him. And I feel like I'm failing a lot. And so I think that aggravation and that frustration by default comes out. And I'm unnecessarily rough sometimes. Because there's sometimes where I'm like, man, Jason, why are you being rough with him right now? Like you're really mad at yourself. Like, don't take it out on the boy.
If you figure that out, you probably just solve the world's problem right there.
I don't know about that. But
because it is kind of the natural thing.
It is.
But as a grandparent, it's just different. And there's just a purer love, or a less judgmental love, or a less, I don't know, just you don't have as much worries anymore, and you just love them, and they respond. It's pretty cool.
I have some clients who are grandparents who are raising their grandkids.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, the kids are no longer in the picture. Sometimes because they pass away.
Yes.
But sometimes because they just
bad choices
have gone astray.
Yeah.
And have and so what advice would you give to them actually?
Well, I think they have the same.
Because that pressure's back
thing
on them.
Well, in a way it is and it's not. My wife was really, really cared for her by her grandparents.
Okay.
And I don't see that they were any different than grandparents. I mean, they loved Roni dearly. And she did have responsibility, but it wasn't from a stick perspective. It was more about she did not want to disappoint them. They loved her dearly. And I'm not saying that's not available to parents. It's just a little bit different. And I think it really worked for her. And similarly with my grandparents, my parents were real involved in my life, so it doesn't really equate. But I don't think it necessarily changes that they're going to love them in ways that are a little different than parents. But instead of the stick, and that's a little bit of a harsh way to put it, but you know what I'm saying.
I'm known for the stick.
Well,
not
and
so
that's
much
not
the
a
carrot.
bad thing. It's just, the way it is. But I think grandparents they've seen more of life. They're maybe more...
Things don't bother them as much.
That's correct.
Because I've been there, done that.
Yeah. And it's, at the end of the day, God's still in control and things are going to be okay. We're just not finished with the story yet. So I just believe that there's a little more grace. I don't know if it's more love. It may be a little different, but
it could possibly be the fact that when we're young, we don't have the benefit of that experience to contextualize with. So, like, if I'm not careful, I look at things way too black and white. And it's like, I feel like what you're articulating to me is that, man, when you've got decades under your belt, you realize that you're just thinking about things a little too dramatically. It's a little too extreme. Like everything's going to be okay.
Everything's going to be okay. And maybe it's just a simpler way to think about it. Again, God's in control, and we're supposed to serve and do the things we can every day to do the right thing and the best thing. We'll make mistakes, but it's going to be okay. And I just think people get all bent out of shape over little things, and I was like that. I mean, I was definitely in control. I've learned I'm not in control.
Yeah, there it is. That's ultimately what it boils down to. If we can circle it all back to to that greater ideal and the ability of taking your perspective out of yourself and viewing yourself through a divine perspective.
Yeah.
The older you get, it's probably not that it's easier to do that, but it's just the fact that you've got more experience in life. You have more experience doing that through enough adversity to where it transforms and changes and sanctifies you.
Used to just hang on for dear life and do all the things that I thought was the best thing to do. And God said, oh, yeah, you can do that. And I realized, I wish I wouldn't have done that.
I wish I wouldn't have done that.
He said, you can have it. You can do it. No problems. It's not the end of the world. But then later I'm thinking, why did I do this? This was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
So I think you just learn to live a little bit more open-handedly.
Yeah. Compound that experience times.
After a while, I've done that before. I'm not doing it again.
And you just become more of a patient person.
Yeah, I think so. You hope so. I mean, that's the prayer. And I hope so.
Yeah, I think the Bible says in Proverbs that the hoary head is a crown of righteous, or is a crown of glory if it be found in the way of righteousness. Yes. Absolutely.
True.
That's a great segue. Let's talk about you growing up?
Just grew up here in Midland.
Okay.
I was kind of a wild child, and
Ooh, how wild are we talking
well,
about?
we don't have to go there. But it's kind of a cool story because when I met my well, I'll leave that alone. Anyway, I got married to my high school sweetheart
Okay.
by way of one of my close friends that connected us because he wanted to date her, but didn't feel like it was appropriate to say, "Hey, I'll date you." So he fixed her up at a dance that she had to invite somebody.
Okay.
And so he picked me because I was the least likely one that she would like, and so he could swoop in and rescue
Oh, how
her.
very sneaky of it. How very
And
sneaky.
anyway, we connected and ended up married. We've been married almost 50 years now. We've been together 50 years.
So it didn't work out the way he planned, huh?
No, not really. It didn't really work out my plan either. I had no idea what my plan was going to be. But what happened is she had a really deep faith in Jesus early in her life. I didn't really. I was a religious person, and I just knew that what she had was something very, very different than me. And I just realized it was a heart issue for me.
Yeah.
And I just realized, oh, okay, this is very different than where I lived. And so our relationship early on was just about Jesus. He was our connector, and it wasn't us, but it was kind of this triangle. And
And did that develop early on?
almost immediately.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool. And then went to college. You leaving high school saying I'd never live in this godforsaken town.
Yeah.
I'll never be in the oil business, and was determined to not. And ended up
Coming back.
going back. Went into the oil business kind of as a
Going in the oil
consultant, and realizing we traveled a lot. We didn't actually own a house. We traveled and lived kind of on the road for a couple of years, and it was fun. We loved it, but it wasn't home. And realizing that if I was going to be in business, we're going to raise a family, Midland's probably our best shot.
Wow.
And moved back in the 80s. And
Okay.
been here ever since.
Okay, let's backtrack, zoom out just a little bit.
Yeah.
Not backtrack, zoom out. Let's talk about Midland. How was Midland different back then to how it is now? Or is it fundamentally different? Is it the same?
I would say that in ways it is the same. It has always been entrepreneurial and family oriented, and I don't think that's changed. I think it's still the
Why
same.
do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. I think just a lot of people come here recognizing the opportunities, and it's still very family oriented. And I don't think that's a change. It's different in the sense of when we would get up in the mornings and hop on our bikes and be gone literally till 9 or 10 at night. We just came in whenever. We might come in for a meal and back out.
It was a different world
It
back
was
then,
a
for
different
sure.
world, and I don't know that was a good thing, but it was different, and it's kind of sad to see that you just can't do that with your children anymore.
No.
And there was a lot more organized sports. I don't know if those are good or bad things, but it was a very small town. You couldn't get away with anything.
Right.
Everybody knew who you were. They knew
What
your
was the
parents.
population back then?
I don't even know. Probably.
I think it was like 20, 30,000
Yeah,
maybe?
it was under 50, but I couldn't tell you
Was
exactly
like
the number.
Wadley even?
Yeah, it wasn't even there. That was when we went in the country. It was across Wadley Street. I don't even know if it was. Yeah, because we lived at Mogford and Shell.
Yeah.
And not very far north of that, you're out in the wilderness.
Did you grow up around the same time that the Bushes were here?
Yep, he's a little bit older than me, but yeah, it's kind of the same town.
Yep,
When
same
we've
feel.
talked about stuff like that, it's like, we used to do the same thing.
Nice.
So it was a great town, but all of a sudden there were all these deals. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It was a real independent, entrepreneurial place, and that hasn't changed.
My friend and I were a friend closer than a brother. We were talking, and it seems like back then this was the Wild West. It was kind of like a frontier where you had an opportunity to build and create something that was appreciated.
Absolutely.
And we were talking about that, like what are frontiers that are still left today where you can go and build something from nothing, and it's appreciated. Do you feel like Midland is still that way, or has it gotten too big?
No, I don't think it's too big, and
Okay.
I do think it's that way. And you think about the things that we appreciate. It's really, we don't want government in our lives. We'll be in control as much as we can be, and those haven't changed. And I just think that it's the one of the best cities in the planet because of those things. We really, really want to do it on our own, and just not everybody has that opportunity. I get that. I don't want to say like it's everybody can do it, but I just see this is a really special place from that perspective. Now comes with responsibility.
Yes. Okay, now let's put a pin in that. I want to give people a little bit more context of who you are. Mm-hmm. So, so they know who Sam is.
Yeah, I gotcha.
I think they've pretty much gathered by now that you're Sam Perry's brother.
Yeah, we look a lot alike. He's a little bit better looking, though, I say.
Whatever. Well, Sam will be happy to know that.
Yeah, there you go.
You were mayor, and so you were mayor, I think, right before Jerry Morales was mayor.
Correct.
Okay, so you're a Midlander, you're born and raised here, you left here to go to college, got married, swore you'd never come back.
Here we are.
Here we are. Okay, how did you get into this journey of being an entrepreneur, and then how did you go from being mayor from there? And I think that's a great way to circle this back to responsibility.
Yeah, so I think I've always been an entrepreneur. I always wanted to be wealthy. And I didn't really understand that as a young person. I didn't, it was more driven with financial. Sure. And, I was real transactional, not very relational. And so it's not something I'm really proud of, but that's just, your path is your perfect path in my, God can take whatever and turn it into something. So I don't regret it. There are things I wish I wouldn't have done just through transactions with people and things that, just didn't work out. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I've always been an entrepreneur. And at one point I was in my mid-30s and I thought I was supposed to be a missionary because God loves missionaries a whole lot more than businessmen.
Oh, really?
This is my, I had this hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy of faith. And so these top guys were missionaries, and then you have pastors and teachers and doctors, and just above axe murderers were business guys in my world. So I went off thinking, I'm going to become a missionary. God will love me more and move our kids.
So did you already work in the oil field?
Oh, yeah. I had started my business in college. Roni and I started our companies when we were really young, and as a consultant. And so we were like in our 20s starting our business. And this is, 15 years in, and I'm thinking, okay, we're not really wealthy, but if you can live in a foreign country on your own, it doesn't take much. We can do this. We don't have to raise money. We can become missionaries and not require, funding. Yeah. So this is my crazy way of thinking. And so we moved to Costa Rica for a summer and went to language school and all this stuff. And during that period of time, God said, "Did you learn this on your own?" And what it meant to me was that all this experience I'd had was not educated. I'd got an engineering degree. I wasn't pursuing engineering. I was in business, doing all the stuff on my own, recognizing God was preparing me for business. But I didn't know it. And what it freed me to do is to say, I can go back in business, and that's my mission field. Okay. So it completely changed from me just striving to
So it was a mindset shift.
Correct. Well, it was, and not only that, it was allowing me to do what I really, really wanted to do, because I didn't think that was good enough.
I see. Okay.
See what I'm saying?
So before you went to Costa Rica, the attitude was business owners are just above axe murderers.
Right.
But I want to be a business owner.
Yeah, I really like that.
I don't want to be poor.
And then I knew that's what God made me to be. I just couldn't figure out how to put those two things together.
Got it. I don't want to be poor. I'm right above axe murderers. And this is what God wants me to be.
Exactly.
I can imagine there's some internal conflict.
There was a lot going on. And I couldn't even articulate it, really. I can look back and see all that, but I really just, and then this scripture, you know, he came, it's John 10:10 is kind of my life verse, and just about, you know, he gives us what we really desire. That's where we can really serve him.
Yes.
And so that's really what kind of freed me up to do business in, you know, in this different world. And it was fun to watch because I just wasn't holding on quite as tight, and things actually worked out better.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how that works.
Imagine how that worked. Surprise.
So how many kids did you have at this point?
We had 2 children.
And so you had 2 kids when you were married.
Moved to Costa Rica.
And you moved to Costa Rica. Yeah. Okay, so the wife and the kids are with you.
Yeah. Well, actually not so much. So our oldest, Chaz, was actually living with another family because our apartment was so small it couldn't hold. It only had 1 bedroom, and it took up the whole room. And so Brooks, our youngest, slept on a wooden bench outside, being right by the front door.
Oh wow!
So it was a great experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
No,
bad.
It actually sounds exciting.
Cool. It was pretty cool. And Brooks would hang out with all. We lived in this apartment complex, and he'd play soccer with all the neighborhood kids, and we'd get ready for dinner and just hey Brooks, time to eat. And he'd pop out of one of the houses or one of the apartment windows because everybody was just, and he couldn't speak a word of English. I mean, they could speak a word of English, but they communicated pretty good. So,
I love it.
So it was a great experience for us. And then I realized this was probably mid-30s.
Okay. And you guys were there for like a year?
No, just a summer.
Just a summer.
Yeah, just a summer.
Mid-30s. Okay, so you spent your entire 20s straight out of college.
Yeah.
Building a business. So when you say so when you say consultant, like, have you seen the show Landman?
Yeah, it's nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
No. Yeah, we mainly, what I did at those days, I was a consultant really analyzing federal leases. So we lived a lot of time in D.C. and worked in the BLM in Alexandria, Virginia. So it was a fun place to live.
Old Alexandria,
we actually had an apartment in Old Alexandria, Virginia.
Yeah. So, wow. It's a really nifty place. It's hard to describe. It feels like you're going back in time a little bit.
Yeah, it was like that, especially when we were there. We lived right on King Street and it was fun. Mm-hmm. And anyway, and we were both working. Ryan and I were working together, and so it was a really good time for us to develop our marriage. And
wow.
And
you're in D.C.
I'm in D.C.
So you weren't here in Midland?
No, not during that. There were about 10 years I wasn't here.
Okay.
You're right.
And then so Costa Rica.
Yeah.
You kind of have that spiritual shift in the way that you were thinking. It seems almost like there was a little bit of some closure and peace to these little demons that you're struggling with deep down inside, and so the insight that you get biblically is you're not, this hierarchy doesn't really exist in God's economy.
Yeah, Maslow did come.
So you demolish that.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then what value system or what perspective did you build in its place?
It's just this concept of generosity and treating people the way you want to be treated, and everything changed. And I realized, I don't have to get the last penny of this deal or get the best, take advantage of anybody. It was just this freeing ability to, gosh, if I'm not supposed to have it, I'm not going to go for it. I mean, it's just, maybe it's not for me. And It was just completely different. And then as time goes on, it started to actually, have some fruit coming from it.
Yeah.
And it just kept getting deeper and deeper and better and better. And I don't know, it's still there today.
You describe yourself as being fundamentally transactional.
Yeah.
So it seems like after Costa Rica, now you are fundamentally relational.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I love that so much because that's where I've tried to take this industry. It's like, listen, we don't have to be transactional. At the end of the day, if we focus on relationships, the asset and the revenue will just naturally follow.
It works.
And you may not see it today, but you're planting, and it's, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase, right? Like it'll come in. And I have been fundamentally blessed with a lot of success. And some of my peers have looked at me and been like, so
What's your secret sauce?
What's your secret? What's your strategy? And I try to articulate something that, it's like, hey, relationships first, right? And you give as much value away. And it's not that you're giving it away, you're investing it.
Yeah.
And you're looking at a return on your investment, not necessarily in dollars, but in relational capital as well. And there's so much power in that. So
Absolutely.
I think from an evangelical Christian side of entrepreneurism, there's a tremendous amount of value in how you build community and how you interact with others that way.
Absolutely. Because if you have a good name, and whatever it takes to maintain that good name will always have returns. It may not be financial. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about.
100%.
But just having a good name is the very best thing you could possibly have. And my dad had a great name here, and and I didn't want to ever sully that either. And so this legacy concept was there too. And now our kids, same story. We've built this company, if you will.
I love it.
With all about legacy and relationship, and that's all that matters. And if it doesn't matter what we're doing with whom, we want to treat them the way we would like to be treated. It's in a way, it's really simple, but in practicality, it's hard. What happens when this happens?
Yes.
How do you treat somebody the way you want to be treated when they just really mess with you? So, and that's been fun working with my children because we get to live those experiences, and it's like, okay, is this just lip service? Are we really saying this? And how do we act it out? And that's been the most important and best thing in my life right now.
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
I love it. My mind immediately goes to Proverbs, where a good name is rather to be chosen than choice gold and silver and rubies.
And it's
right?
absolutely true. And you recognize that it if it started before you, which probably did, you just want to maintain that. You don't want to screw that up, if you will. And
Absolutely.
This legacy thought. So, and Midland is you don't find a lot of people that are fourth, fifth, sixth generations, and I think we will start seeing more people that are coming back to Midland. And we've definitely seen it with this most recent generation, because it used to be when I left, nobody was coming back. Now there are a lot of people coming back.
We joke and say this place has a gravitational pull.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And it's usually when people come to work here and then they leave with an oil company, and they realize their best friends ended up being back here. So they'll come back in their retirement years. But I'm seeing it now as people coming out of college.
Yeah, petroleum engineering degrees and stuff like that. Yep, absolutely.
Because it's the pinnacle of, if you're in the oil business, you're going to be in Midland, Texas.
Okay, one other thought before we shift, and the danger with this is that we always run out of time, is the idea of being legacy focused.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I could probably do better as a financial advisor in this practice with leading my clients. Because we are multi-generational,
Right.
holistic, comprehensive, faith-driven family planning.
Right.
Nowhere in none of that did you hear financial.
Right.
But the idea is that it's woven into all those things.
Of course it is.
But it's not the focus.
Right.
The number one focus is a legacy or multi-generational. And it's one thing to say we have a long-term perspective with our investments. And of course,
That's the standard line.
that's the standard of being a financial advisor. You have to guide and lead clients into having a long-term perspective of their finances and not making decisions every time the markets turn, right? Like that's probably most of my job on the financial advisor side of it is that type of behavioral coaching. And then of course, Sam Perry, and we did a podcast on behavioral coaching.
Yeah, right.
So
they always buy low, and buy low and sell high. No.
Yep. And the fact that math has very little to do with people's financial decisions. It's always emotions and thought processes and biases and behaviors. But the point that you're driving home and that I'm trying to drive, it's not just about being long-term with our money. It's about being long-term with our vision.
You're right.
And the Bible says a righteous man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, and focusing on this thing of legacy. Because the beautiful thing about capitalism and being an entrepreneur, or even if you're my client listening to this and you've worked a 9 to 5 your entire life, well, you're still practicing capitalism.
Oh, absolutely.
By investing.
Absolutely.
And this is not all for your consumption.
Right.
There is an idea of stewardship. And it's not even for your kids or they still have to earn their, I get all that. It's all about, as a family, how are we going to transfer our values from one generation to the next so that we can be a part of impacting and changing the world.
Right. Absolutely. And I think what happens is people think about, giving to your grandchildren money. Well, don't give them any money. I mean, that isn't what I'm talking about.
No.
It's give them a good name.
A good name, which is to be chosen rather than
right.
good stocks.
Yeah, and I'm not saying not to give. I'm not going to get into that world. But the point is, that's what that scripture I believe is talking about, is a good name.
A good name.
It has nothing to do with a check.
Yeah, no. Finances are all a good thing, and I think in a Judeo-Christian worldview, again, the assumption is that finances is involved in it somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
But the emphasis is what is all of this serving, and the name is elevated above all of it.
Well, and you said it a minute ago, and I'm a real strong believer that we don't own it at all, zero. We're stewards.
Good stewardship.
And that's it. And, we can spend it, we can invest it, or we can give it away.
Yeah.
And how you figure that out as a family is an important thing to do.
Yes, sir.
And it's not an easy answer, because at different times in life, you may not be able to do as much in this bucket as you would like to do in that bucket. And so that process is a really great thing to be doing with your children and grandkids.
And 100%. It's why I get up every day and do this.
Well, and it's really
I love those conversations, and I want to be in those conversations.
We've had about 100 businesses in my lifetime. And you can tell a lot of them did not work. And so we.
But that's entrepeurism.
You
keep failing forward.
That's the point.
You don't lose until you give up.
That's right.
So just don't give up.
Keep going. Then I thought, well, maybe I should help.
Okay. Yeah.
I had never done anything like this. And I thought, how hard could it be?
Was this before September 11th or after?
Let me think about this. It was probably before.
Okay.
I don't know if that even figured into my calculus.
Okay.
I just felt like, if it's been so good to me, can I give something back?
Okay.
And I said, how hard could it be? I remember thinking it can't be any different than running for student council in the 7th grade. And I think the leaders we have today are really still in that same vein. I know Lori her heart's in this. She was raised here and she understands Midland. And I just think it's really nice to see this younger group kind of picking up the ball and running with it. And it's important for us to be able to get that baton in their hands. And
talking about legacy again.
Exactly. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. But it's really up to us to do that. And then someone's got to pick that up.